With the capitulation of the Axis and subsequent end of the war, German cinema came to a complete standstill. What was once one of the big propaganda machines of the 20th century, rightfully referred to as Hitler's Hollywood by critic Rüdiger Suchsland, a standardized system following the Hollywoodian formula of entertainment with sprinkled ideology, withered within a second. No new films were made during the first year, as German filmmakers specifically were prohibited from filming. Much of the country was still in ruins when the film industry returned to work near the end of 1945. The result, the Trümmerfilm, translated, rubble film, is a film of its time. The first attempt by Germans to both reckon with what had happened and what is currently happening. Films of shattered national identity and attempts at redemption. The classic Trümmerfilm opens in ruins, presenting a besieged Germany as the wasteland it had become. Destruction is omnipresent, as much physically as psychologically. The Murderers Among Us, the first post-war film, produced by DEFA in the Soviet sector, establishes the majority of the visual motives of the Trümmerfilm. It tells the story of Susanne, a concentration camp survivor, and Hans, a soldier, both returning to Berlin, forced to share Susanne's former apartment due to one of the many housing shortages that occurred in Germany around this time. Tormented by the memory of the war, Hans seeks out his former army captain Bruckner, who ordered the execution of a Soviet village near the end of the war, and, having escaped responsibility, is now owner of a factory that turns battle helmets into cooking pots, living a comfortable bourgeois life. Alongside birthing the visual motives, Murderers is also the temporal directive for all subsequent Trümmerfilm narratives, which would investigate the past, depict the struggle of the present, and strive for a future. Hans seeks out his former army captain, acting both as an individual out for vengeance and redemption, and as a symbol for the redeemable German, a necessary component for the construction of a new state identity. Similarly, the position of Susanne as embodiment of goodness, which guides Hans into a better life, necessitates her being a concentration camp inmate, fact otherwise anachronistically disregarded in the film, simply in order to forego any ties to Nazi aesthetics, given her archetypal German look. A central concern then is the bifurcation of good and bad Germans. Seldomly, the Trümmerfilm would be radical enough to conflate the two, to actually accuse the viewership of complicity. When it did, is in Marriage in the Shadows or Rotation, it presents it as an avalanche, an indelible slip into complicity, whereby characters were never actively nativistic, but purely driven by personal motives. The Trümmerfilm's recognizably unflattering images of rubble and struggle within a war-torn city lead to obvious comparisons to the contemporaneous neorealism. Collaboration between the biggest Trümmerfilm studio and neorealism's biggest figure reinforces this. With Germany Year Zero, even Roberto Rossellini ostensibly made a rebel film. He too makes conscious use of the cliched imagery, when undoubtedly more profound to a sophisticated viewership than to most Germans, yet even if one was aware of the cinema of Germany at the time, no one would confuse Rossellini's film as a Trümmerfilm. This is not simply because Rossellini reputes to be a bigger artist than Staudter or Keutner. A crucial difference that disqualifies the Trümmerfilm for more serious consideration lay in the relationship between the new cinema and classicism. The general thesis is that post-war German cinema lacked a true break from classicism, manifested both in style and structure, which, though superficially different, has recognizable genre elements, like the crime film Razzia or Murderers, which Robert Chandler, in a study on rubble film, refers to as a clash of Western and melodrama. Some of the films display as vague variations of former Nazi genre films, and whereas those subtle resistances, like Helmut Keutner's Romanticism, were subversive in 1943, they could but elaborate failure in a post-war world. Neorealists function both as political and aesthetic repudiations to fascism, the theory formed and burnished during the years of Mussolini, a fact neither lessened by the involvement of Rossellini and De Sica and Il Duce, nor the eventual bastardization of the movement. So even if certain German directors were only equally complicit, they failed to compare since they yet stuck to their ways. In the end, German cinema was glued to its past more definitively. They perhaps had a great ambition, yet found themselves incapable of any somber, true reflection. Germany was divided in four, with each zone controlling the cinema of the region. The most active and relevant were the American Soviet sectors, manifested in a standoff between UFA, the studio established in the late 20s, who quickly rose to prominence, continuing throughout the Nazi years, as well as DEFA, established by the Soviets just after the war. While the American sector initially flooded the market with Hollywood films as means of spreading dominance and influence, only in the later 40s establishing film projects, DEFA was active from the start. Many of the now remembered Trümmerfirma Einfeld DEFA films, ironically said to have been the most liberal of sectors during this time. It was of course only as the years progressed and the Cold War intensified that DEFA as a political tool too became more strict. Comparable here are Somewhere in Berlin, an early film in which the hopeful ending of the city reconstruction invites, but not necessitates, the socialist reading, and the early 50s film Council of the Gods, which unravels into a full-fledged anti-American pamphlet excoriating American capitalism more so than the Nazism the Soviets just beat, if anything establishing an insidious link between the two. Western films were generally more codified and polished than their socialist realist counterparts. A further dichotomy is found in the treatment of the Trümmerfilm itself, whereas DEFA maintained their often serious political tone, numerous US-backed parodies and comedies emerged near the end of the 40s. This split here is epitomized in the occasionally Brechtian Ballade of Berlin, where the protagonist seeks privacy and political extrication. Another film is Film Without a Name, a meta-comedy about a German film production in which director, writer, and actor come to clash over the theme and style of the to-be-produced film, the discussion widening from the particular to the general. The director favors truth and realism in line with Eastern films, while the latter ventures into the Heimatfilm niche. It entails the struggle of the time between serious self-interrogation and the natural demand for entertainment, which would drive the following decades. Here it is crucial to remember Willy Fritzsche's career. A major leading figure during the Nazi period, he appears well aware of the Nazi approach and by proxy seeks to emulate it, succeeding in doing so. Despite its intentions, the Trümmerfilm had a clear problem in its reckoning with the past, one that was so unique to the country. It harks back to the issue of immediacy. Many of the directors and writers were Nazi directors, some likely even party members or private parlors. To expect their self-interrogation and subsequent denazification appears a lofty yet ultimately extreme one. But it's precisely this premise that these films invite that contribute to a general lacklusterness in them. The biggest victim in the Trümmerfilm seems the German himself, thereby putting himself in a similar position to actual Nazi regime victims. Those concerns were not entirely unaddressed. See The Last Illusion of 1948 or Moritori, the first film to show a concentration camp and one active in reversing Nazi motives towards a universalist vision, but those appear few and far between. The Nazi past was one insignificant problem atop many others. Hope is the ironic constant in these films, promising the good Germans a re-establishment of identity concomitant to their physical convalescence, a catalyzer which quickly led the industry to the Heimatfilm. Just as Nazi cinema was a continuation of the pristine Hollywoodian style of the 30s, post-war cinema can be seen as yet another continuation thereof. As Shandley concludes, a through line can be drawn from the early sound period to the 1950s. By popular accounts, German cinema died with Lang's departure to Hollywood and was revived by the arrival of the late 60s and early 70s. What happened in between lay forgotten. 30 years of atrophy. With the fall of Nazi Germany, an opportunity for reinvention bestowed itself upon the country and its cinema. But plagued by more factors than sheer will, such a project failed. Kenji Mizoguchi said of his film My Love Burns that the temporal closeness of event and reproduction engendered a passion that marred political detail and objectivity, creating in the process a unique, if unobjective film. Similar can be said with the ambitions of the Trümmer film that ended up in its failure. Even if unsuccessful, the Trümmer film presents an interstice into a period of anime, into a cinema of rivaling interest.
Ich bin doch unschuldig! Ich bin doch unschuldig!